to the new parak, I believe, right?
You watched video on
Okay, Zok to Gemara. Chatos ha'oif she'osa lemata k'maisa chatos. The chatos ha'oif, we know it's supposed to be done lamata. So it was done by the book. K'maisa chatos. So that's the only reason why we have this example is because of how it's going to lead into the next examples. Because this is exactly a chatos done by the book. The Shem chatos. So it's also lamata, k'masa chatos, l'shem chatos, voskin, zayin beser, ksheira. The only thing that can be better than this is not doing it there in the first place, right? K'maisa chatos, but l'shem oila. So we all know if you shech chatos, shaloi l'shem chatos, it's going to be possible. So k'maisa chatos l'shem oila, or k'maisa oila l'shem chatos, you shechted it k'maisa oila. What does it mean k'maisa oila? What did you do wrong? The Gemara is going to discuss that. K'maisa oila l'shem chatos, or k'maisa oila l'shem oila. Psula, that carbon is possible. What about asa l'mayla k'masa kulon? Psula. We know the chatos, it's supposed to be spritzed l'mata min chuta sikra, and if you did it l'mayla, even if you did everything else, the way it's supposed to be done, it's going to be possible. Gewaltig. Also, okay, that's right. So Zok the Gemara, also l'mayla k'maysa kulam, just looking at Rashi, k'leimer k'masa echad mikulon ha'amurin kan, even if you did any one of the mistakes that are listed here, it's going to be possible because it was also l'mal. Oila sa'oif. Now we're going to go through the same sequence with the oila sa'oif. Oila sa'oif she'asa l'mala k'masa oila l'shem oila. Again, that's doing the oila by the book, kshera. But what if you did it k'masa oila, which we'll have to see what that means, l'shem chatos. Look, k'masa oila l'shem chatos means you did exactly what you're supposed to, but you did on the oila shaloi l'shem shaloi l'shma, so that's kshera, ubelvat shaloi also l'bayla. That's exactly what the halacha is. When you bring an oila shaloi l'shma, the carbon is kosher, but it's not oila by l'shem.
worse. It's the Shem chatos.
That's what shaloi l'shma means. Okay, k'maisa chatos. But what if he made it k'maisa chatos? Again, we need to know what that means. What wrong? There's many differences the way you're makar v'chatos versus an oila. So what precisely are we referring to? L'shem oila, and you did l'shem oila, or you did k'maisa chatos l'shem chatos. Psula, it will be possible. Asa lemata k'maisa kulon. If you did it lemata k'maisa kulon, v'afilu k'maisa oila l'shem oila, it will be psula, because it was asa lemata. Okay, the Baltic. Because the oila, you're not supposed to do lemata. Okay, so now we need to understand what does the Mishnah means when the Mishnah says in the first half, K'maisa oila l'shem chatos, what was done K'maisa oila? What did he do that would be like an oila? So Zok the Gemara, Deshani b'mai. When it says in the Mishnah, Maisa oila l'shem chatos, what exactly did he do wrong? And with boila eze davar b'chatos asa K'maisa oila. What exactly did he do wrong? Ilema deshani b'malika. If you're going to say that he did the malika the way you do a malika by an oila, we learned yesterday that by the chatos you're only supposed to cut one simon. By the oila you're supposed to cut two simonim. But if you also remember, we had a machlokes yesterday. What happens by a chatos if you cut two simonim? We had one shita who held that it would be possible, and we had another shita who held it would be kosher. That was the very last sugi we had. So Zok to Gemara, our Mishnah clearly says that this would be possible. If it's asa k'maisa oila, it's going to be possible. That means, are you going to suggest Nema the loiker b'lazar bar Shimon? You're going to have to say that our Mishnah that holds that it's possible if you make malika of both simonim by the chatos, can't hold like Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, who just taught us yesterday the Amar Shemati Shemavdilim the Chatas Oif. So for Zok Gemara, I don't understand why would that be a problem. Why would it be a problem to say that our Mishnah is not going according to Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon? That's exactly what last Mishnah had, right? That's what we said. The last Mishnah said that if you're Mavdil by the Chatas Oif, it's possible. So the Gemara said that this Mishnah is not going like Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. Why? Because Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon also wouldn't be possible. So fact the Gemara is so very good. So it's the like Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. V'lo yukimna, the like Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. Didn't we just say the same thing with the last Mishnah? That it's not consistent with Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, because Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon says that a chatos that you severed both simonim is kosher. So Gemara, you know what? We're going to make an attempt. We're going to make an attempt to say that although last parak wouldn't be consistent with Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, maybe we can say that our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. So it can't be referring to what you did wrong by chatos, is that you made malika of both simonim, because that wouldn't have been a problem. But maybe you could say the shani b'hazah. You did the hazah in the wrong place. As Rashi says, Shaloi hiza elamitza, shamitzui hi avodas ha'olah. By the chatos, you let it spritz, the dam spritzes out of the goof of the bird onto the wall of the mizbeach. But by the oila, you do mitzvah, you just squeeze the bird out against the wall of the mizbeach. So he did the wrong gazah. So when it says he did it l'shem chatos kamai sa'oila, it means he did the zrika the wrong way. And there, everybody would agree that it's going to be possible. And hachinami mistavra. It's actually mistavra to say that that was the thing that he did wrong. Mitikatani seifa. Because what does it say in the seifa? Asa lamaila kamaisa kula and psula. What if the chata sa'oif, which was supposed to be spritzed lamata, what if he spritzed it lamaila? And he did it in any other way, as listed above. Vafilu kamaisa chatos l'shem chatos. Which means, asan lamaila kamaisa kula and psula means even if everything else was completely pristine and perfect, but the fact that it was also lamaila, it would be psula. So the question is, the shani b'mai, what did he do wrong? Ilemer the shani b'malika, if you're going to say that he did the malika lamaila, right? Because the whole question is he did something lamaila. If we're referring to the malika that was done lamaila, that's for sure not an issue. Because Amar Mar, Malika b'chol makom b'mizbech kshera. The lamaila and lamata, where the oif is lamaila michot sikra, and the chatos is lamata, that's lagabe the zrikas adam. But lagabe the malika can occur everywhere, right? The Mishnah even said it's convenient to do it where you're going to be spritzing the dam, but technically the malika is good anywhere. Ela lab, the only way you can possibly describe also lamaila kamaisa kulam psula is the shani ba'azah, that he made azah lamaila meichut sikra, which is the way you do an oil, not a chatas, and that's why it's possible. So oy bezah umi the seifa ba'azah, when it said also lamaila kamaisa kulam psula, it's referring to a deviation in the hazah. Reisha nami ba'azah, it would make sense to say that in the reisha, when we said you did chatas kamaisa oila, there was talking about the azah done improperly, and mitzvah was done instead of zrika. So therefore, it's mistavra to say that our Mishnah is in fact consistent with Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. Zok Gemara, no, midi area, hab kedisa v'chadisa. You're right. In the Sefer, you have to say it's referring to the zrika sadam, because the malika, it's non-consequential where you make the malika. But in the Reish of the Mishnah, we're going to learn in speaking the shani b'malika, and what he did wrong was he cut both simonim, and in fact, our Mishnah holds it's possible, and our Mishnah is not consistent with Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. So that's how this Gemara concludes. We've analyzed the first half of our Mishnah, and we're coming out saying that the first halacha in our Mishnah is speaking about the malika, right? And the second case of the Mishnah of Asa Lamaila is referring to the Zrika. So it's Reisha b'malika v'seifa b'zrika. Now let's go on to the next half of the Mishnah. Oilas oif. So the oilas oif had the same series of cases. So I'm just going to turn back to the Mishnah and let's see the Gemara. That was the textbook case of Oila. But then there's a Kamaisa Oila L'Shem Chatos. That's clear as well. But Kamaisa Chatos L'Shem Oila, what does it mean that you were Makiv and Makter and you processed this Oila, L'Shem Oila, but you made a mistake and you did one activity like the Chatos? What exactly did you do like the Chatos? We're probing the same question we had on the Reisha. So Zok Tehele Gigamar, the Shani B'mai. What exactly did you do by the Oila to mimic the way the Chatos is processed? Ilema the Shani B'malika. If you're going to tell me that by the Oila Sa'oif, instead of making Malika of 2 simonim as required, you only made Malika as once on 1 simon, that doesn't make sense. Why? Because the next Mishnah that we're about to learn today says, Midikatani Seifa Kulan, all of the psulim that we were discussing in the first Mishnah, where it's apostle of carbon, Zostavisin, even though it's apostle of carbon, Ein Mitamen Beveis Abliya. Normally, an Avelas Oif Torah is Mitamen, somebody who swallows it. If a Zoivite, the Malika worked, even though it's apostle of carbon, but the Malika worked, that this will not be considered an Avelas Oif Torah, it's not considered an Avela. That's number one. So, we had a whole list of cases in Mishnah A that the carbon is rendered to be puzzle or psula, but it's not tummy. That's number one. Number two is umay alun bahem. You're going to be moil. Why are you going to be moil? Because the only time you're not moil on a carbon is once the carbon is discharged to be able to be eaten by humans. By an oiler, you're always going to be moil. Humans never allowed to eat it. But a chatos, once the zrika sadam is done, and now the kohen's allowed to eat from the basar, there's no din me'ila anymore. But the about we're talking about chatoses that never discharged their kedusha. Why? Because it became possible and there was never a heter to eat it. Therefore, they will be a din me'ila. Zok to Gemara, the shani b'ma, ilemi the shani b'malika. The problem is if he did the malika wrong, it says ein metamen bebeis abliya umayalim bahen. So what's the problem with that? The problem is the Mishnah there quotes, which we're going to learn in just a couple of minutes, that there's a machlokes involving this shayla, and our Mishnah will not be consistent with Rabbi Yeshua in the next Mishnah. Namely, the loiker Rabbi Yeshua. The Iker Rabbi Yeshua, if you're going to want to say that our Mishnah here is consistent with Rabbi Yeshua in the very next Mishnah, Ha'amar ein moyalim, he said ein moyalim. Which means, so what's wrong with that? Zok to Gemara, he holds ein moyalim, and the problem is the first half of the next Mishnah that we're about to learn. Beferish says on all these cases it's moyalim. So if we're going to learn that the case was that the Malika was wrong, our Mishnah, which seems to say Ein Moyalan, because the next Mishnah says that everything in our Mishnah is Ein Moyalan, won't be consistent with Rabbi Yeshua, who in a certain case says Ein Moyalan. So our Mishnah says Moyalan, because the first half of the next Mishnah is addressing our Mishnah, and it's saying all the cases in our Mishnah that we just learned, it would be Moyalan. But Rabbi Yeshua would hold in one of the cases of our Mishnah, Ein Moyalan. And we want our Mishnah to try to be even according to Rabbi Yeshua of the next Mishnah. So therefore, the Ella b'mitzui. Let's say that what was done like a chatos by the carbon oila was b'mitzui. Now, b'mitzui zokt Rashi, u'v'haloi palag Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua only argues and says, Ein Moyalan, the kedusha of the carbon is discharged. He only says that if the malika of the oila was done like the malika of the chatos. And we're going to get into his reasoning. But that wouldn't apply if the malika of the oila was done properly, like the malika of the oila is supposed to be done on both simonim. And then the zrika was done like the chatos instead of like the oila. Even Rabbi Yeshua would be moide that moyalan, because this carbon didn't have a heter. So now we're saying that the case of oila is referring to the zrika, not the malika. So Zok to Gemara Ema Seifa. Let's look at the next case in our Mishnah above. Oilas ha'oif she'asa lamata. The oilas ha'oif that you did lamata, you're supposed to do it lamayla, but you did lamata. Kamai sachatos l'shem chatos. Rabbi Lazar Amar moyalimba. Rabbi Lazar says you're moyal. This is the next case over here in this Mishnah here. Rabbi Lazar Amar moyalimba, you will be moyal. Why? Because you're going to have an oila that never becomes motor to be eaten. And Rabbi Yeshua Amar ein moyalimba. So what exactly are they arguing about? What exactly is the case that Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar are arguing about? What is the specific case where Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yeshua are arguing? If they're arguing by mitzvah, that's not the case. There, even Rabbi Yeshua would be moida that moyalba. Amar the Amar Rabbi Yeshua the shani b'malika. Rabbi Yeshua only said that if you did the malika of the oila, like the malika of the chatos, there he says ein moyalba. And Rashi, this long Rashi explains why is it that Rabbi Yeshua holds you had an oila and you were makrivit, you did precisely the process of the chatos. You made the malika on only one siman, and you did the zrikas like a chatos. He holds that discharges its kedusha. You know why? Because he has a very big mechudishtika shita. He holds that if you are makriv and oilis oif completely like a chatos, it actually becomes a chatos. So if it actually becomes a chatos, then after you did the mitzvah adam, which is normally done, or after you did the zrikas adam, which is normally done by the chatos or oif, now this meat is mutter to be eaten to the kahanim, and that's why he says ein moyalim. So now we have to really go back a couple of lines because we've just understood the reasoning of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua holds that when the oila is done completely from beginning to end, exactly like a chatos, the oila actually transforms into a chatos. If it transforms into a chatos and it's done exactly the way the chatos is supposed to be done from beginning until the end, so the basar becomes mutter to eat, and therefore it's ein moyalim. But if you started off doing the oila like an oila, you made a malika on both simonim, now it can no longer revert into a chatos. So if you did mitzvah adam, if you did this rika like the chatos and not like the oila, that's just a possible carbon, and even Rabbi Yeshua would agree. So let's go back a couple of lines because it was a little bit confusing because we didn't even know what Rabbi Yeshua held till a couple of lines later. So Zok the Gemara again. Oilas oif, the shani b'mai. What did he do wrong in the processing of the oilas oif that the Mishnah says this carbon is psula? Ilema the shani b'malika. If he made the malika of only one siman, midikatani seifa. The problem is the very beginning of the Mishnah in the seifa, before it even introduces the machlokes of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar. So it's mashma. This is unanimous. Midikatani seifa kulon ein metabel meveis habliya umayalabed. The Mishnah, before it even introduces the machlokes of Rabbi Yeshua, it says in a unanimous format. It's not quoting anybody that the Friedrich Mishnah that we just learned, everybody holds umayalabed, which means everybody holds the kedusha is not discharged. Everybody holds it's a apostle of carbon. Name of the like Rabbi Yeshua. This wouldn't be consistent with Rabbi Yeshua because we're going to say a little bit later in the Mishnah that in a case where the malika of the oila sa'oif was done like the chatos, and then you follow through doing all of the malachas, just like the chatos, the ikar Rabbi Yeshua Amar ein moyalim, there wouldn't be me'ilah. Therefore, the thing that you did wrong by the oila sa'oif that renders it possible, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore there's going to be a din me'ilah, is eve'ela b'mitzvah. It must be that where did you go wrong? You went wrong in the mitzvah, which means the malika of the oila sa'oif was done just like the oila sa'oif, and therefore the oila sa'oif does not convert into a chatos. And then by the oila sa'oif you did the wrong type of zrika. That's going to be possible, and therefore it will be my alaba. Even Rabbi Yeshua would be moida. The problem is ema seifa. Let's look at the next case over here in this Mishnah. Oila sa'oif she'asa lamata k'masa chatos l'shem chatos. So the oila sa'oif that you did lamata k'masa chatos l'shem chatos, meaning you did an oila sa'oif and you treated it exactly as if it was a chatos. From beginning to end, you did the process of the oila sa'oif like a chatos. There, Rabbi Lazar Amar ma'alim and that's clear. The machlokes is only if by the malika from the first avodah the oilas oif was processed like a chatos, and you only cut one siman. The shani b'mai ilim b'mitzui, it can't be it was b'mitzui, because we just said a minute ago that Amar the Rabbi Shua the shani b'malika. The only time Rabbi Shua holds it transforms into a carbon chatos is if from the very first avodah from the malika you've already treated this oila like it's a chatos. But b'mitzui, if you made the chaticha simonim of both simonim, and now it's an oila, and in the middle you spritz the blood like you would spritz the blood of a chatos, that's going to be yesh b'mila, even according to Rabbi Shua. Miyamar, he never said over there ein b'mila. The ela b'malika. So then you're forced to say that the machlokes Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Lazar in the sefer of the next Mishnah is referring to malika. So if you think about it, we've been all over the place because the Reisha we said is speaking b'malika. This sefer discussing the machlokes Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar is also speaking b'malika. Umetziyaso, at the middle case, when you did the oila like the chatas and it was possible, that's going to be b'mitzvah. So the reish is malika, the mitzvah is mitzvah, and the seif is malika. So that's exact. You got that right. That's exactly what it is. Reish of a seif b'malika u'mitzvah b'mitzvah. Gewaltig. So before we learn the next Mishnah, I've already spoken at Rashi, who explains the reasoning behind Rabbi Yoshua. But let's learn this Rashi, to Geshmak Rashi, and it'll give us a better understanding of Rabbi Yeshua. Ela b'mitzvah is a Rashi. Uvahalei polag Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua agrees that yesh me'ila, if you shechted the oila, or you did malika on the oila, the way you were supposed to, now the carbon remains designated as an oila, and if you do the mitzvah adam in the wrong fashion, it would passel. And if it would passel, everybody agrees that yesh boy me'ila, because the kedusha was never discharged, the meat never became mutter to be eaten. The taima kidur Rav Ada, the svar of Rabbi Yeshua is like Rav Ada explains on Tabaro's daf. The Omar Haya Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua used to say, "Oilas ha'oiv she'asa lemata kamasachatos." The oilas oiv, where you did all of its avodas lemata michot asikra, just the way the chatas is supposed to be done, l'shem chatas, and you had in mind to do it as a chatas. The halach is nimsheches mishem oila v'nases chatas oiv. It's magic. You have an oila, and just because you treated it exactly like a chatos, it becomes a chatos. What aveir is it being mechaber for? I don't know. Maybe it's aveir having your own kavana. But whatever the case is, it's a new magic that if you treat another like a chatos, it transforms into a chatos, and therefore it's a kosher chatos. But the high time ela kedeshani b'malika, this svar of saying that the carbon transforms from another to a chatos only works if you started from the very first step. Like Zevachi will explain again tomorrow, mishum da oila tzricha shnei simanim. In order for it to be a kosher malika for a carbon oila, you have to sever two simanim. The chatos ksher b'siman echad. The chatos, it would be kosher if you only severed the one. Umalikas oilas ha'oiv lamata lesa. Malika of the oilas ha'oiv lamata, you don't do it lamata, you do it lamaila. V'zeh shemalka lamata. This fellow did the malika lamata. U'l'shem chatos b'shimin rishon, and he only cut one siman the way a chatos would be processed. Hishlim ba kol masa chatos. He did everything perfectly. He made the malika of one siman. He spritzed the blood lamata michut asikra. He made it into a perfectly pristine carbon chatos. Lefichach yotzis ba mishem oila. Now this bird is oist oila v'nases chatos, and it magically metamorphoses into a chatos. V'avachatos ha'oif she'asa lamata k'maisa chatos l'shem chatos. This is a textbook example of a perfect execution, pun intended, of a carbon. She'ein ba me'ila. There won't be the me'ila because the carbon was processed properly. The basar becomes mutter. Aval hecha the malika loy shani. But what if the malika was done like a noila? Umal kalamayla uchamaisa oila. Now, because you made this rika in the wrong place, or you made the wrong type of rika, su loy nimshechas b'shinui demitzui shaloi mitza elahiza kidin chatos. The mere fact that he did everything like an oila, but the mitzui was done with mitzui, the mitzui done with hazah, like the chatos, and the talamata lamahav chatos, that won't transform it. Only if from the beginning till the end, it transforms. So that is the shita of Rabbi Yeshua, And Zoktun's the Gemara that in order for our Mishnah to make sense, the Mishnah, when it talks about something that was done improperly, is actually volleying back from a problem in the Malika to a problem in the Zrika, and it's not speaking consistently about the same soul. Beautiful. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. V'chulam, all of the psulim that we discussed in Mishnah A of the first Mishnah of the parak we just learned, ein mitamin bevei sabliya. The Malika works to the extent that the oif does not become tamei, umoy alun bahen, and you will be moil. Chutz mechatas ha'oif she'asa lamata k'may sechatas l'shem chatos, meaning a chatas oif that was done properly, so the basar becomes mutter to be eaten by the kohen. There is no din me'ilah. Any other way you did a chatas or oila where it ended up in a pasal or matziv, there's always going to be a din me'ilah. Let's have a look at Rashi. V'chulam af al pi shenifsalu, even though all of these karbonis were pasal, nevertheless melikason mitayrason midei nevela. The oif does not become an nevela. The ein metamen bevei sabliya kedin nevela seiftar. The halacha is if an oif tar becomes an nevela, if you touch it, you don't become tummy. The only way you can become tummy from an nevelas oif tar is if you actually swallow it. If you don't swallow it, if you touched it, it doesn't make you tummy. A nevelas oif tar is a very unique type of tumah that only transmits in a very specific way. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Zok Rashi weiter. Any soul that you've done in the chatas or the oila will render the carbon possible, and therefore there's me'ilah be af bechatos. You know why? Hoil v'nifsalu, since the carbon is a possible carbon, the ein bohen shas heter l'kayhanim, and there's never a point where the kayhanim are allowed to eat the meat. Lo yotzu midei me'ilah shabehen. So they remain prohibited with the isur me'ilah, except a kosher carbon. Chutz mechatos ha'oif she'asa lamata ma'isa chatos l'shem chatos. That's ksheri. And therefore v'shuv ein ba me'ilah afilu lazar. So even though a zar is not allowed to eat the basar of a chatas ha'oif, but if he has enough from it, he's not moil. The din me'ilah got left off. What about the oil that was done properly? That's also a kosher carbon. True, but the meat never becomes mutter to the kahanim because the oil you burn completely on the mizbeach. So therefore, even if an oil was done properly, there's still a din me'ilah on its meat because there's never a time where that meat becomes mutter to a person. Okay, gewaltig. Oila sa'oif, so can the Mishnah weiter. Oila sa'oif, she'asa lemata, k'maisa chatos, l'shem chatos. So we've already learned in Rashi that this means from the Malika, you processed an oila sa'oif exactly like a chatos, you only severed one siman. Rabbi Lozer Eimer Ma'alaba, because that's a possible carbon, it's an oila that you try to make into a chatos, it's possible, and therefore Ma'alaba. But Rabbi Shua Eimer Ma'alaba, as Rashi explains, that the carbon gets transformed into a chatas. Let's see Rashi. Rabbi Eliezer Amar Ma'alamba, Ilahi, whatever took it away from the Dimi'ila. Shasheter l'kayhanim einla. This never had a shasheter l'kayhanim. Rabbi Yeshua comes up at the Ba'am Shal Chidish that ein mayalim, the kivan deshina shema, u'baisel, u'makayim l'shem chatos. Since you did everything on this carbon like a chatos, nasis chatos, it becomes a chatos, kidim afarish become. So the Mishnah now elaborates on the conversation that Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar had. Now, Rashi told us earlier, why does the Gemara care so much to say that our first Mishnah should be consistent with Rabbi Yeshua? Right? The Gemara says it must be speaking about mitzvah, because if it was speaking about malika, Rabbi Yeshua would hold yesh ein mila. The answer is because Rabbi Lazar was a shamuti, he was in chayim, and Rabbi Yeshua is the person who we prefer to say that our Mishnah should be consistent with Rabbi Yeshua. So Amar Rabbi Lazar argued with reasoning why if you did the oila k'maisa chatos, there should be a din me'ilah. And he asked the following shaila: Uma im chatos, madika chatos, she'ein moy alam ba lishma. A chatos that was done properly, you're not moiling it. Why? Because the basar becomes mutter l'kayhanim, and there's no longer a din me'ilah. Nevertheless, by the chatos kishashina eshema, if you were makar b'chatos l'shem oila, it's possible, and therefore there'll never be a heter to eat its meat, and therefore my alamba. So oila, shemay alamba lishma, and oila, even if everything works out perfectly, there's going to be a din me'ila on the oila. So the oila is clearly more chomer than the chatos when we're discussing din me'ila, because an oila never loses its me'ila. So kishashina shema, if the oila is even worse than a regular oila, you actually makrave it like a chatos. There should be a din me'ila. How can you, Rabbi Yeshua, say there's no din me'ila? Amalei Rabbi Yeshua, that's not a kasha. You know why a chatos that you process like an oila, you know why there is a din me'ila on it? What did you make the chatos into? You made it into an oila, or you attempted at least to make it into an oila. Well, guess what? The oila never loses its din me'ila. So yes, the chatos might be weaker, but you made the chatos into an oila. By changing the oil into a chatos, you're actually lowering its level, and you're making it into a carbon that if done properly, there would be no din me'ila. So therefore, I'm justified in saying that the oil that you were makar from beginning to end, like a chatos, becomes a chatos, and therefore there's no din me'ila. So Rabbi Lozer responds, Amar Rabbi Lozer, what about koche kochim? Shachton b'dorim. What if you shechted koche kochim b'dorim? That would be possible because it has to be shechted b'tofan. So Rashi says it was shechted b'dorim l'shem shlomim. What if you shechted koche kochim l'shem shlomim? Okay. Shechted b'dorim v'shachton l'shem kochim kalim, and you shechted it l'shem shlomim. What's the case there? That should be a raya. That it doesn't matter what you try to change it into, because what's the halacha there? There you try to make it into a shlomim. By a shlomim, there's no din me'ila, and guess what? Umay alamben, there'd be a din me'ila. It's a completely possible carbon. So avada, you would be moil. So crash umay alamben mipnei shenivsalu b'shchitas dorim. That when you shecht an oila on the dorim, it's a possible carbon. The zrik of that carbon won't help. Once it's checked in the wrong place, it's possible, right? So even though, what was your attempt? Your attempt was to change it into a carbon that there's no demeila. So even though you wanted to change oil into a chatos, you should still be moil. You see that by kachim kalim. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua, that's not a kasha. Loyim amrit b'kachei kachim sheshachtem b'daram v'shachtem the same kachim kalim. You know why over there's a din me'ila? Shekein shina eshmam lidavar sheyesh by iser veheter. A carbon shlomim, there's no din me'ila. True. After haktaris adam, but before haktaris adam, before the basar becomes mutar to eat, even the shlomim has a din me'ila. Timer ba'ila. I'm sorry, by a shlamim, it's not timing. Even after you make your zrikas adam and the basar becomes mutter to be eaten by the bailim, yes, there's no din me'ilan. But the imurin that you have to be makrib on the mizbeach, even of a carbon shlamim, there will be a din me'ilan. So when you try to change an oil into a shlamim, you can't say you changed it into something that doesn't have a din me'ilah, because avada there is a din me'ilah. Yes, there is part of it that doesn't have a din me'ilah, the basar, but the imurim always have a din me'ilah. They never become mutter to be eaten by a yachid. Timer ba'oila sheshina shemal davar shekulaheter. By the chatas oif, I don't know if you know this, but you're not makter anything on the mizbech. The entire oif is eaten by the kohen. The mizbech gets nothing. So you try to change the oila into a carbon that completely goes l'bayim. There's mamish no din me'ilah on any part of it. So therefore, Zok Rabbi Yeshua, I maintain my position. I maintain my position that the chata, that the oilas oif that you shech in the same chatos will transform into a chatos, and there will be no did be'ila on the basar of the gewaltig. Should we push a little weiter? We have a little bit of extra time. I'll push a line weiter. The next line will go slower and then prepared yet. So Rabbi Lozer Rabbi Yeshua. So the Brisa elaborates further on the conversation that Rabbi Lozer had with Rabbi Yeshua. Asham sheshachtoi b'tzafon. You have an asham sheshachtoi b'tzafon in the right place. L'shem shlomim, but you had in mind that it should be a shlomim. That should be a right to me, Zok Rabbi Elazar. Why? Shashina Shemoy, you changed its name to a Shlomim, and you changed it to something that is no din ila. Umay Alambay, and you're moil. Zok Rashi. Asham Sheshachta B'Tzafon, where you're Mashana its name, and you're still moil. So Umayalam by Lefnei Zrika, before the Zrika. So the Acher Zrika, after the Zrika, Leka Me'ila, there would be no Me'ila, Sharei Necha Lekayanim, the Shaloi L'Shnemoy Le'Posel Bey. We did have a machloikis if an Osham Shaloi L'Shnemoy is like a Chatos or not, but the main sheet in our Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta was that an Osham that you check with Shaloi L'Shnemoy, even though it's Olu L'Bailam L'Shem Chayva, but the Zrikas Adam will be matir, the basar, to be eaten to the Kahanim. So Asham Sheshachtu B'Tzafin L'Shem Shlomim Yochiach. Sheshina Shemoy, they were Mishana its name. Uma Alabayan, up until the Zrika, there's going to be a din Me'ilah. V'Af so to you, Rabbi Yeshua, Al Tatama La'oila, you shouldn't find it fair that a carbon oila, Sha'af Api Sheshina Shema, even though you changed its name to a Chatosh, Shim Alaba, you should still be moil. Let's see Rashi. Of course, we're talking about the oilas oif. That's what the discussion between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar was about. If you had an oilas behema that you processed like a chatos, like polik, there, of course, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't argue. There he also holds that there is a din me'ilah. Okay. You know, at 6:40 we'll stop here and we'll be mamshach tomorrow. I don't want to get into a rabbit hole where it's going to get confusing. We'll stop here.
Yeah.
You know, my doctor, my pediatrician, when he retired, he said, I want to walk out before they have to carry me out. So I better stop here when I can still walk out.